So I've been so inspired hearing all of you speak, and I'm excited to also tell you some stories from my life in this landscape. One of my earliest memories, actually most of my earliest memories, involved my grandfather, who I thought knew everything about this Mojave Desert. He'd say, "That's creosote bush. That's the smell of the desert in the rain. That's purple sage. You can cook with it. It'll season your food. That's the Big Dipper. That's the Little Dipper. That's the Pleiades. That's Orion. This is how you find quartz crystals. This is the difference between gold and fool's gold. Watch out for rattlesnakes and kissing bugs and scorpions. And most important, listen to this place because it'll tell you things. It'll teach you things that you need to hear and need for your life." My grandfather died of cancer when I was about 14. And in his final 6 months, he had to go to town. He couldn't live in this landscape anymore. And he took to keeping 2 quartz crystals at his bedside and periodically holding them in his hands. And this was the 1980s, and you know, crystal energy was a thing, and I thought, is he gone a little mad? What is he grasping at straws here? Is he desperate to find a cure, and he thinks that these rocks that he picked up are gonna cure his cancer and save him? And of course, hindsight, years later, I realized what was actually going on. These were his connections to his special place. And they were his connections to what's eternal, to this landscape that's bigger than human time and bigger than all of us. My grandfather made a big impression on me, and through my life, I followed his advice, and I kept looking and listening and watching and learning from this landscape. And I've seen amazing things out there over the years. After one monsoon rain, I saw glowworms, phosphorescent larvae, out there looking for another friend in the dark, glowing. I did not know glowworms existed, and in fact, I couldn't find it in a book that they existed in our area at the time. I saw a herd of mule deer, which my father had always told me lived out here, and my grandfather and my family, but I thought they were pulling my leg. And then, oh, look, there's a herd of deer going by. Our pond erupted with tadpoles from the red-spotted toad, even though it's in the middle of nowhere, and there was just, how are there toads out there and frogs in this dry, arid place? In winter, the bachelor bands of bighorn sheep come down in the mountains, and they stand on top of the rocks, and they pose for each other. You know, and they're like, "I'm on a rock, look at me, hey." And then they play King of the Mountain with each other, which is amazing to watch. And one spring day, when I was really small, every blackthorn bush all around our ranch was covered in hundreds and thousands of these pretty little patterned bugs that I'd never seen before. And the next day, they were all gone, and I've never seen them since. What's up with that? I don't know. It's like that. I will see these things just once in my lifetime, and then they're gone, but they're in my heart forever. I've seen coyotes that had a sweet tooth for honey after a beehive was abandoned, and a fox admiring his own reflection in the window as he walked by. And there's this vulture and crow who for years have been hanging out together, and they're clearly family to each other, hang out all the time. And we have one purple sage plant, just one, that blooms white. Don't know. The more I've observed over the years, the more curious I've become. And the more I'm in awe of this place. I started reading books, inviting out researchers to come to this part of the desert and taking part in studies like the Joshua Tree Genome Project that we're doing with Todd. And that's opened up a whole new perspective about the smallest details and the big picture, and how everything out here in the world operates beyond the scale of human time. Like the Weethump Wilderness, that's Paiute for ancient ones, and this area is full of ancient ones. The Joshua trees and yuccas here can live to be over 1,000 years old. And as Todd says, if a Joshua tree is the size of a man, it's 80 to 100 years old already. Thanks for that. Did you know that every single yucca species has co-evolved with its own species of yucca moth in a symbiotic relationship where the moth pollinates the flower and then lays its eggs in the flower and gets the next generation of moths going? And it's not just any yucca moth can pollinate any yucca. Joshua trees are also yuccas. No, every single species has its own species of moth. And the shape of the mouth parts of the moth exactly fit the shape of the flower parts, like a key in a lock, where they are only made for each other. Wow, right? And there are other beings out here that are even older. The creosote bushes grow outward, and they send out shoots underground and then bring up new plants that are the same as the first plant. It's just spreading, and they keep spreading, and then they form these rings because the original part of the plant that started is too old, and it degrades and it dies. And I just found one of these right off the driveway that I couldn't see until last month because there was a yucca growing in the middle of the ring. And then lo and behold, there's a ring right there, and it's a couple thousand years old. It's in my driveway. What's going on? It's amazing. I just feel like we have to get out there and see more, and also we have to protect these places so they're here for us to even learn to live with them. One plant's really been working me lately, though, and that's the cholla. About 5 years ago, we had this huge spring rain, and it created the biggest flood of my lifetime in our area near Searchlight. And the cholla cactus, we have the buckthorn cholla. So imagine the growth habit of this. It's like the antlers of a deer. And this plant was thirsty, and it started drinking that rainwater and drinking and drinking. And I looked at it, it's getting bigger and heavier and bigger, and I'm thinking, this is not gonna go well for you guys. Are you sure? Can you be done drinking now? I don't know, but they were not done because those resources were available, and they kept drinking. And then I started watching the limbs falling on the ground, and the winds come and blowing them over and exposing the roots, and a bunch of them died. Because when those resources were available, those life forms were primed to take advantage, to help themselves, right? And I thought, oh my God, that's us. That's human beings, and I'm so hard on humans all the time for all the stupid things we can't seem to not do to ourselves and each other and our planet, and it seems like we can't help ourselves even though we think we're so smart all the time, but we're not. And then I realized, like, this is life. Every single living being is programmed to protect itself and thrive and have health and acquire the resources when they're available, because then you're going to have a mega drought and they're not going to be available. And I felt this compassion for all of us well up, and I realized that we're in a time where we can no longer think an act in just human time. We have to experience this vast time that is beyond us in order to just get through our lives with our sanity intact. And the last example I have of that is Spirit Mountain itself, Avikwame. You've heard Paul talk about what a sacred place this is, that it is the creation place for the Mojave people and the other human-speaking people. And you know, this correlates to what we know geologically about this place. It is one of the oldest geological formations that is exposed at the Earth's surface. It is over 1.5 billion years old. I'm talking about the Paleoproterozoic period, and I had to practice how to say that word. And let me take you back to the Paleoproterozoic period, when Spirit Mountain was young. The Earth was mostly covered in ocean, and the first life forms were single-celled organisms, and they didn't breathe oxygen because our atmosphere was not full of oxygen. But what they did was they gave off oxygen as a waste product, and they thrived and survived, especially those cyanobacteria. They really had it good back there in the Paleoproterozoic period, hanging out in Spirit Mountain. And of course, they did what any of us would do. They multiplied, they got it, they had it good while it lasted, and they filled our atmosphere with beautiful, beautiful oxygen. That was their downfall. Most of them do not exist today, and because they cannot breathe oxygen, but we can. And because of that first extinction event, we'll say, of that species, almost extinction event, that enabled multicellular life to form, and all of the world of the past 1.5 billion years, right, to evolve to what we have today. So this whole thing is so much bigger than us, and it's constantly changing, and it's going to change, and we're going to see it change, and we are seeing it change, but it's never been the same, right? It's always been adapting to changes and finding ways to succeed. And it's always in transition, and so are we. We just have to get through it gracefully together and do what we can with this moment in time that we're blessed to have together, and then try to make that transition as graceful as possible for the future. That comforts me, and it also connects me to the bigness of everything. And one day when it's time for me to transition out of this body, I want to have something in my hand that symbolizes and connects me to this sacred space of Avikwame. Thank you. Well, that is, you know, what we had planned for you, but we also certainly want to make room for any of you who have a story, a thought, a joke, a question, a comment, anything that you would like to talk about or discuss. We've taken up even more time than we expected because we felt passion in the room tonight. But does anybody here have any questions, comments, things that you came for? Yes, come on up. Come up, please. Come up, because I appreciate you coming up, because then we can be part of the video and hear you on the microphone. Yes, right? You know, it's even more exciting.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Kim. Okay, well, I wasn't quite expecting this, but okay, I can work it. It's fine. Okay, I need to gather myself just for a quick hot minute. So I just wanted to say that first of all, I really enjoyed the beautiful exhibition and hearing these wonderful stories that are really actually incredibly moving. And I think that I first came to this area in Nevada 8 years ago. I'm British, if that wasn't already been ascertained by you. But I came, and I'm very aware of the USA being a destination for lots of British people to come, and the fascination with America. And I came here really for a vacation, and I've travelled around quite a bit, and I arrived here, and really without knowing a great deal of the location. I'm a bit of a nerd, so I like to know where I'm going. You know, I'm not one of those people who just gets on a plane and they don't know what destination they're going to, or anything about its context. I knew enough about its context, so I'm dumbing it down a bit. But I came here, and I didn't expect to feel what I felt, and felt such an incredible connection. And as a creative person myself, and someone who works in academia, and having a bent for research, I just felt a resonance, which I've never felt anywhere before. You can go to places, you can appreciate them, you appreciate the landscape, you see the buildings, the architecture, whatever it is, but there was something really deep-rooted about this place, and I didn't even really know what it was. I still don't know what it is, and I'm on a mission to find out. And I've been coming for the last 8 years, interrupted for the past 3 years, because no flight's being able to bring me here. But then I also think about my relationship of being someone with a British identity, the colonial aspect of the British colonies, and the disruption that has. And I think about my relationship as an alien in this land, and some of the conversations we've had about not being from this place and being a guest is exactly how I feel. And I kind of wrestle with, how can I have this passion for this place and realize it in some meaningful way without it being about colonizing or taking ownership, but being a kind of a guest in a way that I'm not taking up space for someone else who should have that space. It's a constant sort of wrestle. But actually, how can I be an ally? How can I be a contributor? How can I help recognize the relationship of British colonization that has happened and ripped out so much of the world? And how can that be realized in a meaningful way? So I wanted to really say, from an anecdotal point of view, this is somewhere that I've always identified with strongly, so much so that when Alicia Curlin knew that I was coming, she wrote in an email to me, "You're coming home." Aww. And this is how I feel about it, and that really struck me. So the conversation and the dialogue and the stories for someone who is an alien, who can still recognize a sense of home in a place, is something I'm hugely grateful to all of the people, all of its ancestors, its land, whomever is existing within it now, and those people who want to preserve it, is something that's incredibly important to me. And especially when that's done in a creative way, and about understanding and taking joy and experience, being in a moment, having a feeling, a rooting with the land, is really evocative. So I just wanted to really come up here to say thank you. And thank you for making space for me too, and for receiving emails from people who tell you that you've come home.
Okay, anyone else? Do we have time? We have time for perhaps one more person. Yeah, come on.
This is like totally off the cuff. I had no expectation that I was going to be standing here. I hope you had a chance to hear the soundscape recording that I made, probably very close to the scene of that picture there a couple of years ago. And if you didn't, there's also a little art thing I have in a QR code. And what I wanted to say was that we talk about preserving the land, preserving the sound of the land is every bit as important. The sound of the land is just as much the sound of the wind and the trees, the birds, the animals, it just is part of the land as the rocks, the flowers, and the night sky. That's what I got to make a recording 2 years ago, and it was kind of an unusual experience in that 2 years ago, spring of 2020, was, as you probably all too well aware, a pretty terrible time. And what happened was everything shut down. And in this particular case, in this very area, the planes stopped flying. And as a sound recordist, plane noise is pretty much my arch nemesis. It's very hard to get away from jet noise. So in that spring of that year, I went out and I made a bunch of recordings that I can't make anymore, and that fortunately we have at least a chance to hear something. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Fred. If you haven't gotten a chance to hear his recordings, definitely have a listen. We Thump, what is the name of that one? The We Thump at Dawn. We Thump at Dawn. If you type in We Thump at Dawn, you can listen online. Thank you so much for taking this journey with us. I look forward to more travels together with you all in the future in the Avikoame landscape. And if you want to do something to help, let people know that you love this place, that it's meaningful to you, and that the idea of keeping these public lands intact for the future is one that you agree with.